in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight never penetrates and pressure can crush a human body in seconds, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Steele Rodriguez made a decision that would end his naval career forever. With his submarine's communication systems crackling with urgent orders from the carrier above, he did the one thing no submarine commander should ever do. He ignored direct orders and surfaced his vessel during a classified military operation. What happened in those crucial 18 minutes on the surface would expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of naval command, save the lives of innocent civilians, and transform a decorated war hero into the most controversial figure in modern naval history. This is not just a story about military protocol or chain of command. This is the story of a man who chose conscience over career, truth over obedience, and humanity over orders. Some call him a traitor. Others call him a hero. But everyone agrees on one thing. What Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez discovered beneath those dark waters changed everything we thought we knew about honor, duty, and the price of what's right when the world is watching. Marcus Rodriguez never imagined that his morning coffee would taste like betrayal. The submarine USS Phantom glided silently through the Pacific depths, 200 feet below the surface, as he reviewed the mission briefing for the third time. Something about Operation Silent Thunder felt wrong, like a melody missing crucial notes. The 42-year-old lieutenant commander had spent 18 years in the Navy, with 12 of those years commanding submarines. He had served in the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean, and the treacherous waters off North Korea. Rodriguez had earned his nickname Steel not just for his unwavering resolve under pressure, but for his ability to see through the fog of military bureaucracy to the heart of any situation. His submarine carried a crew of 137 men and women, each hand-picked for their expertise and loyalty. The Phantom was one of the Navy's most advanced Virginia-class attack submarines, equipped with the latest sonar technology, torpedo systems, and communication arrays. But today, as Rodriguez studied the sealed orders that had arrived just 6 hours earlier, he felt like he was commanding a vessel sailing into unknown moral territory. The mission was classified at the highest levels. According to the briefing, they were to intercept and monitor a Russian submarine that had supposedly entered American territorial waters near the Aleutian Islands. Intelligence suggested the Russian vessel was conducting unauthorized surveillance of a new naval facility. Rodriguez's orders were clear: track, observe, and report. Under no circumstances were they to engage unless directly threatened. But Rodriguez had learned to read between the lines of military communications. The timing was suspicious. 3 weeks earlier, a civilian research vessel conducting deep-sea environmental studies had mysteriously disappeared in the same area. The Coast Guard had called off the search after finding only scattered debris. The official report blamed severe weather conditions and equipment failure. Rodriguez's executive officer, Commander Sarah Chen, knocked on his cabin door and entered with a fresh intelligence update. Chen was 38 years old, a brilliant tactician with degrees in nuclear engineering and international relations. She had served under Rodriguez for 4 years, and their professional partnership had evolved into mutual respect and trust. "Sir, we're receiving additional communications from the carrier group," Chen reported, her voice carrying a note of concern. Admiral Harrison Blackwood was the kind of officer who collected medals like some people collected stamps. At 55, he had risen through the ranks with calculated precision, never allowing sentiment to interfere with advancement. Rodriguez had served under Blackwood twice before and had always found the Admiral's methods questionable, though undeniably effective. "What's troubling you, Sarah?" Rodriguez asked, setting down his coffee cup and studying her expression. Chen hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Sir, I've been reviewing the sonar readings from the area where the research vessel disappeared. The official report mentions equipment failure, but our long-range sensors picked up acoustic signatures 3 weeks ago that were unusual." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Fine, unusual. Torpedo detonations, sir. At least 4 separate explosions, consistent with Mark 48 torpedoes. American torpedoes." The cabin fell silent except for the subtle hum of the submarine's nuclear reactor. Rodriguez felt his chest tighten as the implications became clear. If Chen was right, an American submarine had destroyed a civilian research vessel. And now they were being sent to the same area to intercept a Russian submarine that might have witnessed the attack. "Have you shared this analysis with anyone else?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "No, sir. I wanted to discuss it with you first." Rodriguez stood and walked to the small porthole, though there was nothing to see but black water. "Sarah, if your analysis is correct, we're not hunting Russians. We're participating in a cover-up." The next few hours passed in tense preparation as the Phantom approached the target coordinates. Rodriguez called a senior staff meeting in the wardroom, gathering his department heads to review the mission. Lieutenant Jason Murphy, the weapons officer, was a 28-year-old prodigy who could calculate torpedo trajectories in his head. Chief Petty Officer William Bull Thompson ran the sonar department with 22 years of experience listening to the ocean's secrets. "Listen carefully," Rodriguez began, his voice steady, but serious. "We may be walking into a situation that's more complicated than our orders suggest. I need everyone to be extra vigilant. If you see or hear anything that doesn't match the official briefing, report it immediately to Commander Chen or myself." Thompson raised his hand. "Sir, my boys have been picking up some interesting chatter on the underwater telephone. Sounds like there's been increased Russian submarine activity in the area, but the patterns don't match standard surveillance operations." "What kind of patterns?" Chen asked. "Search patterns, ma'am. Like they're looking for something specific." "And sir," Thompson turned to Rodriguez, "we've identified the Russian submarine. It's the Kazan, one of their newest Severodvinsk-class boats, Captain Yuri Volkov commanding." Rodriguez knew Volkov by reputation. The Russian captain was considered one of the most skilled submarine commanders in the world, known for his adherence to international maritime law and his reluctance to engage in aggressive tactics. If Volkov was in these waters, he had a legitimate reason. As they approached the coordinates, the submarine's advanced sonar began painting a detailed picture of the underwater landscape. The ocean floor in this region was scarred with deep trenches and underwater canyons, perfect for hiding a submarine or concealing evidence of an attack. At 14:30 hours, Thompson reported contact. "Submarine bearing 270, range 12 nautical miles. She's running silent, but she's there. Profile matches the Kazan." Rodriguez studied the sonar display. The Russian submarine was positioned directly over the area where the civilian research vessel had disappeared. "Is she moving?"
"Negative, sir."
"Appears to be maintaining station." "Wait," Thompson pressed his headphones closer to his ears. "Sir, I'm picking up mechanical sounds. Sounds like they're deploying some kind of underwater equipment." Chen looked at Rodriguez with growing concern. "They're searching the wreckage site." Suddenly, the communication system crackled to life with an urgent message from Admiral Blackwood aboard the carrier USS Ronald Reagan. "Phantom, this is Admiral Blackwood. You are ordered to proceed to attack position and prepare to engage the Russian submarine. Intelligence confirms hostile intent." Rodriguez felt the weight of command pressing down on him like the ocean pressure outside his vessel. Every instinct told him that Blackwood's order was wrong. The Russian submarine was investigating a potential war crime, not committing one. "Weapons, prepare torpedo tubes 1 and 2, Rodriguez ordered, buying time while he considered his options. "Torpedoes loaded and ready, sir," Murphy reported. Rodriguez stared at the tactical display, watching the two submarines represented as small blips in the vast digital ocean. Digital, in the military, following orders was not just expected, it was the foundation upon which everything else was built. Questioning a direct order from an admiral was career suicide. Refusing to follow it was court-martial territory. But Rodriguez remembered something his first commanding officer had told him 20 years earlier. "Son, there will come a day when you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. When that day comes, you'll know it in your gut. Trust that feeling, even if it costs you everything." "Sir," Chen whispered, "Admiral Blackwood is requesting immediate confirmation of attack readiness." Rodriguez made a decision that would change his life forever. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me. I need you to document everything that happens in the next hour. Every order, every response, every piece of evidence we discover. Can you do that?" Chen nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir." "Thompson, what's the Russian submarine doing now?" "Still searching, sir. But I'm picking up something else." "Sounds like they've found debris. Metal debris, consistent with a surface vessel." Rodriguez closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with newfound determination. "All stop. Emergency surface." The command caused immediate confusion in the control room. Emergency surfacing during a classified operation was virtually unheard of. "Sir?" Murphy questioned. "You heard the order. Emergency surface. Now." As the Phantom began its rapid ascent to the surface, Rodriguez activated the ship's communication array and prepared to send a message that would end his career but potentially save his soul. He was about to tell the world what the United States Navy didn't want anyone to know. The USS Phantom broke through the surface of the Pacific Ocean like a steel leviathan emerging from the depths. Water cascaded off her black hull as she stabilized in the choppy seas, her conning tower standing proud against the gray morning sky. For the first time in 3 days, natural sunlight flooded through the periscope and the small bridge windows. Rodriguez climbed through the hatch onto the bridge, breathing deeply as the salt air filled his lungs. The Pacific stretched endlessly in all directions, but he knew that somewhere beyond the horizon, the USS Ronald Reagan and her battle group were monitoring his every move. Within minutes, his communication systems would be flooded with angry demands for an explanation. Commander Chen joined him on the bridge, her tablet secure in a waterproof case, already documenting their unprecedented actions.
Sir, we're receiving multiple urgent communications from Admiral Blackwood.
He's demanding an immediate explanation for our emergency surface. Let him demand, Rodriguez replied, scanning the horizon with binoculars. Sarah, activate our emergency broadcast capabilities. I want you to establish contact with the Russian submarine and patch me through to Captain Volkov. Chen's eyes widened. Direct communication with a foreign military vessel during a classified operation was strictly forbidden without explicit authorization from Fleet Command. Sir, are you certain about this course of action? Rodriguez lowered his binoculars and looked at his executive officer. Chen had followed him through dangerous waters before, but this was different. This wasn't about naval tactics or military strategy. This was about preventing a potential act of war based on a lie. Sarah, 18 years ago I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Today, I believe our greatest enemy might be the truth that some people in our own command structure don't want revealed. Below deck, the submarine's crew worked with professional efficiency despite the unusual circumstances. Chief Thompson maintained his sonar watch, tracking the Russian submarine's position and activities. Lieutenant Murphy kept the weapon systems ready, though he privately hoped they wouldn't be needed. The engineering crew ensured that the nuclear reactor operated smoothly during their surface operations. Rodriguez had commanded these men and women through dangerous missions before, and he knew their loyalty wasn't just to him personally, but to the principles they had all sworn to uphold. If he was wrong about this situation, he would face court-martial alone. But if he was right, he might be the only thing standing between a cover-up and the truth. The communication array crackled to life as Chen established contact with the Russian submarine. After several tense minutes of navigating diplomatic protocols and military frequencies, a heavily accented voice came through the speakers. This is Captain Yuri Volkov of the Russian Navy submarine Kazan. Am I speaking with the commander of the American submarine? Rodriguez took the microphone, aware that this conversation would likely be recorded by both navies and potentially monitored by intelligence agencies around the world. Captain Volkov, this is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez, USS Phantom. I need to speak with you about your current activities in this area. There was a pause, then Volkov responded with characteristic directness. Commander Rodriguez, my vessel is conducting search and recovery operations in international waters. We have located debris from what appears to be a civilian research vessel. Are you here to interfere with legitimate search and rescue operations? Rodriguez felt his heart rate increase. Volkov's words confirmed what Chen had suspected about the acoustic signatures. The Russian captain was investigating the destruction of the research vessel, not conducting espionage activities as Admiral Blackwood had claimed. Captain Volkov, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. What evidence have you discovered about what happened to that research vessel? Another pause, longer this time. Rodriguez could imagine Volkov consulting with his officers, trying to determine the American commander's true intentions. Commander Rodriguez, our underwater recovery systems have located debris patterns consistent with torpedo damage. Based on the blast signatures and metallurgical analysis, the vessel was destroyed by American Mark 48 torpedoes. We have also recovered human remains. The words hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. Chen turned pale as she continued documenting the conversation. Thompson, monitoring from the sonar room, reported through the intercom that he could see the Russian submarine's recovery operations on his displays. Rodriguez's communication system suddenly erupted with an incoming transmission from Admiral Blackwood. The Admiral's voice was cold and furious. Phantom, you are ordered to terminate all unauthorized communications immediately and proceed with your original mission parameters. Any further deviation from orders will result in immediate court-martial proceedings. Rodriguez looked at Chen, who nodded grimly and continued her documentation. He made a decision that would seal his fate in the Navy forever. Admiral Blackwood, I am formally requesting clarification of our mission parameters based on new intelligence. We have evidence that contradicts the original briefing regarding Russian activities in this area. Commander Rodriguez, you are not authorized to gather intelligence independently. You will follow orders as given or face the consequences. Rodriguez took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would end his naval career. Sir, I am invoking my authority under naval regulations to refuse orders that may constitute war crimes or violations of international law. I am requesting immediate review by the Inspector General. The radio went silent. Rodriguez knew that Admiral Blackwood was probably consulting with his staff and possibly contacting higher authorities. Refusing a direct order from a flag officer was one of the most serious offenses in military law. Meanwhile, Captain Volkov had been monitoring the exchange between Rodriguez and his admiral. The Russian captain came back on the frequency, with a tone of professional respect. "Commander Rodriguez, I understand you are in a difficult position. I want you to know that my government has already been notified of our findings. We have documented evidence of what happened to the civilian vessel, and we intend to present this information through proper diplomatic channels." Rodriguez realized that Volkov was offering him a way out. If the Russian Navy was already planning to reveal the evidence through diplomatic channels, Rodriguez's actions might not be necessary to expose the truth. But Rodriguez also understood that diplomatic revelations could take months or years, while political considerations might bury the truth entirely. The families of the research vessel's crew deserved to know what had really happened to their loved ones. Chen approached with an update on their communications monitoring. "Sir, I'm receiving reports that Admiral Blackwood has contacted Fleet Headquarters. There are already orders being prepared for our immediate return to port and your relief from command." Rodriguez studied the tactical display showing the positions of both submarines. They were in a unique situation where they could communicate directly with each other without interference from their respective command structures, at least temporarily. "Captain Volkov, I have a proposal. Are you willing to cooperate with a joint investigation into what happened here? My executive officer has been documenting evidence of unusual acoustic signatures from 3 weeks ago that might corroborate your findings." Volkov's response was immediate. "Commander, such cooperation would require authorization from both our governments. However, I am willing to share our recovery data with you personally if you believe it would serve the interests of justice." Rodriguez looked at his watch. They had been on the surface for 12 minutes. Soon, Admiral Blackwood would likely order other vessels in the area to intercept them. The USS Ronald Reagan could launch aircraft to enforce compliance with orders, or other submarines could be ordered to force the Phantom to submerge. Thompson's voice came over the intercom with urgency. "Captain, I'm detecting fast-moving surface contacts approaching from the northeast. Looks like destroyers from the Reagan battle group, range about 20 nautical miles and closing." Rodriguez made another command decision that would further complicate his situation. "Sarah, prepare to receive data transmission from the Russian submarine. I want everything they've discovered about the research vessel incident, and I want you to prepare a complete report of our findings for transmission to Naval Criminal Investigative Service Headquarters." Chen hesitated. "Sir, transmitting classified information to unauthorized recipients could constitute treason." "Sarah, sometimes doing the right thing and following regulations aren't the same thing. I'm ordering you to follow your conscience, not just your training." As data began flowing between the two submarines, Rodriguez realized he had crossed a line from which there would be no return. He was no longer just a naval officer following questionable orders. He had become a whistleblower, choosing truth over career advancement, justice over military protocol. The approaching destroyers were now visible on the horizon, their hulls cutting through the swells as they raced toward the Phantom's position. Rodriguez had perhaps 6 more minutes before he would be forced to make his final choice: surrender quietly and hope for a fair hearing, or take even more drastic action to ensure the truth would be revealed. Captain Volkov's voice came through the speakers one last time. "Commander Rodriguez, whatever you decide to do, I want you to know that you have acted with honor today. The families of those who died deserve to know the truth about what happened to their loved ones." Rodriguez felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like an anchor. In a few minutes he would have to decide whether to dive and return to base under arrest, or take actions that would brand him a traitor to some and a hero to others. The evidence was clear, the moral choice was obvious, but the consequences would be life-changing. The destroyers USS Fitzgerald and USS Porter approached with the precision of hunting wolves, their radar systems locked onto the Phantom's position. Rodriguez could see their bow waves through his binoculars as they closed the distance at maximum speed. Behind him the bridge hatch opened and Chief Thompson emerged with a grim expression. "Skipper, we've got company underwater too. Sonar contact bearing 185, looks like the USS Hampton. She's approaching from our 6 o'clock depth approximately 300 feet. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Admiral Blackwood was covering all the angles. The Hampton was another attack submarine, commanded by Rodriguez's former classmate from the Naval War College, Commander Jack Morrison. Morrison was a by-the-book officer who would follow orders without question, even if those orders involved forcing a fellow submarine commander to surrender. Chen finished downloading the data transmission from the Russian submarine and sealed the waterproof storage device. "Sir, I've received everything Captain Volkov was willing to share. The evidence is overwhelming. The research vessel Deep Explorer was conducting legitimate environmental studies when it was attacked without warning. 17 civilians died, including 3 graduate students and a Pulitzer Prize-winning marine biologist. The weight of those words settled over the bridge crew. 17 innocent people had been murdered to protect some kind of classified operation, and now the Navy was prepared to compound that crime by covering it up and potentially starting an international incident with Russia. Rodriguez's communication system crackled with an incoming transmission from the USS Fitzgerald. USS Phantom, this is Captain Williams aboard the Fitzgerald. You are ordered to return to submerged operations immediately and proceed to the coordinates being transmitted now. Any resistance will be considered an act of mutiny. Rodriguez recognized Captain Williams's voice. They had served together briefly in the Persian Gulf. Williams was a competent officer, but he lacked the imagination to understand the moral complexity of the current situation. He would simply follow orders and let others worry about the consequences. Chen, I need you to do something that may compromise your career, Rodriguez said quietly, keeping his voice low enough that the bridge microphones wouldn't pick up his words. I need you to prepare a burst transmission containing all our evidence and send it simultaneously to 3 destinations: Naval Criminal Investigative Service, the Washington Post, and the families of the Deep Explorer crew. Chen's face went pale. Sir, that would constitute multiple violations of the Espionage Act. I could face life imprisonment. That's why I'm asking, not ordering. If you refuse, I'll find another way. Chen looked at the data storage device, then at the approaching destroyers, then back at Rodriguez. Sir, if we're going to do this, we need to do it now. Once those ships get within communications jamming range, we won't be able to transmit anything.
Rodriguez felt a surge of pride in his executive officer.
Chen understood that some principles were worth any sacrifice, even freedom itself. Do it. As Chen worked frantically to prepare the transmission, Rodriguez opened a channel to the Russian submarine. Captain Volkov, in approximately 2 minutes, I'm going to be forced to submerge and return to port under arrest. Before that happens, I want you to know that evidence of what happened here will be made public. Your cooperation has helped ensure that the truth won't be buried. Volkov's response was immediate and unexpected. Commander Rodriguez, my government has authorized me to offer you and any of your crew political asylum aboard my vessel. You would be transported to a neutral port where you could seek asylum with whatever nation would accept you. The offer hung in the air like a life preserver thrown to a drowning man. Rodriguez can abandon his submarine, his crew, and his country to save himself and expose the truth from the safety of exile. But he knew he couldn't ask his crew to become traitors to their homeland, and he couldn't abandon his principles even to save his own skin. Captain Volkov, I appreciate the offer, but my place is with my crew and my country. We'll face whatever comes through our own legal system. Thompson called out from the sonar station. Skipper, the Hampton is rising to periscope depth. Range now 800 yards and closing. Rodriguez could see Commander Morrison's periscope cutting through the water as the Hampton maneuvered into position. In a few minutes, the 3 ships would surround the Phantom, making any escape impossible. Chen announced that the burst transmission was ready. Sir, everything is prepared. Once I activate this, there's no going back. Rodriguez thought about his wife Maria and their 2 teenage daughters back in San Diego. Maria was a high school teacher who had supported his naval career for 18 years, understanding that military service sometimes required sacrifices from the entire family. His daughters Isabella and Sophia were proud of their father's service, often bragging to their friends about their submarine commander dad. After today, they might never speak to him again. His actions could destroy not just his own life but the lives of everyone he loved. Military families that produced traitors often face social ostracism and professional consequences that lasted for generations, but Rodriguez also thought about the families of the 17 people who had died aboard the Deep Explorer. Dr. Sarah Kim, the marine biologist, had left behind a husband and 2 young sons. Graduate student Michael Torres was just 24 years old, working on his doctorate in oceanography. Environmental activist Janet Walsh had dedicated her life to protecting marine ecosystems. They had all died because someone in the military chain of command had decided that their lives were expendable in service of some larger strategic goal. If Rodriguez remained silent, their families would never know what really happened and the people responsible would never face justice. Chen, send the transmission. Chen's finger hovered over the activation button for a moment, then pressed down firmly. The submarine's communication array sent encrypted burst transmissions racing across multiple frequencies simultaneously. Within seconds, the evidence of the Deep Explorer massacre was traveling at the speed of light toward newsrooms, government offices, and private email accounts across the United States. Immediately, every radio frequency erupted with angry voices demanding explanations. Admiral Blackwood's voice cut through the chaos with icy precision. "Commander Rodriguez, you have just committed an act of treason. You are ordered to surrender your vessel immediately, or face the full consequences of your actions." Rodriguez picked up the microphone for what he knew would be his final official communication as a commanding officer of the United States Navy. "Admiral Blackwood, I am formally charging you and others unknown with conspiracy to commit murder, violation of international law, and obstruction of justice. The evidence of your crimes is now in the hands of civilian authorities." The radio went silent for nearly 30 seconds. When Blackwood finally responded, his voice carried barely controlled rage. "Commander Rodriguez, you have destroyed your career, your future, and possibly your family's security. I hope you think the price was worth it." Rodriguez looked at Chen, who had been recording the entire exchange. "Sarah, prepare the crew for immediate arrest and detention. Make sure everyone understands that they were following the lawful orders of their commanding officer, and that I take full responsibility for our actions." As the USS Fitzgerald pulled alongside the Phantom, Rodriguez could see armed Marines preparing to board his submarine. The USS Hampton had surfaced nearby, and Commander Morrison stood on his bridge with a look of professional regret. The two men had been friends once, but military duty would now force Morrison to participate in Rodriguez's arrest. Rodriguez turned to address his crew over the internal communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes, this vessel will be boarded by representatives of Fleet Command. I want you to know that every one of you has served with distinction and honor. The actions I have taken today were my decision alone, based on evidence of serious crimes committed in the name of our Navy." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Some of you will face questioning about your knowledge of today's events. I want you to tell the truth about everything you witnessed. Do not lie to protect me or anyone else. The truth is the only thing that can restore honor to our service." Thompson approached Rodriguez on the bridge, extending his hand. "Skipper, it's been an honor serving under your command. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing." One by one, the senior officers shook Rodriguez's hand, each expressing their support for his actions. Even Murphy, the young weapons officer who had the most to lose from association with a disgraced commander, stood firmly beside his captain. The Marine boarding party secured the submarine with professional efficiency. Rodriguez surrendered his sidearm and allowed himself to be placed in restraints without resistance. As he was escorted off his vessel for the last time, he looked back at the crew that had followed him into an impossible situation with unwavering loyalty. Chen approached the Marine captain in charge of the boarding party. "Sir, I need to formally state that I was the officer who transmitted classified information under direct orders from Commander Rodriguez. Any charges related to that transmission should be directed against me as well." Rodriguez felt a mixture of pride and heartbreak as he realized that his entire senior staff was prepared to face court-martial rather than abandon the principles they had sworn to uphold. They understood that sometimes honor required accepting consequences that seemed unbearable. As the Phantom began its final voyage under someone else's command, Rodriguez was transferred to the USS Fitzgerald for transport back to Pearl Harbor. From the destroyer's bridge, he watched his submarine disappear beneath the surface, carrying with it the end of his naval career and the beginning of a legal battle that would reshape the military justice system. But he also knew that somewhere in newsrooms and government offices, journalists and investigators were already poring over the evidence he had sacrificed everything to reveal. The truth about the Deep Explorer would not remain buried, and the families of those who died would finally know that their loved ones had not died in vain. The headlines exploded across every major news network simultaneously at 6:60 hours Pacific Time, just as Rodriguez was being processed into the detention facility at Pearl Harbor Naval Base. Navy submarine commander Alija's cover-up of civilian massacre blazed across CNN's breaking news banner. The Washington Post led with, "Exclusive. Evidence points to military attack on research vessel." Fox News countered with, "Submarine commander commits treason, shares secrets with Russians." Rodriguez sat in a sterile holding cell, still wearing his submarine coveralls, as the media storm he had unleashed began reshaping the political landscape. Through the small window, he could see protesters gathering outside the base gates. Some carried signs reading, "Ridgeweggs is a hero," while others demanded, "Court-martial the traitor." The American public was dividing into opposing camps before they even understood the full scope of what had happened. In Washington, D.C., emergency meetings were being held at the Pentagon, the White House, and Capitol Hill. Admiral Blackwood found himself summoned before a hastily convened panel of senior officials, where he faced questions he had hoped never to answer. The evidence Rodriguez had transmitted was more comprehensive than anyone had anticipated. including recorded conversations, sonar data, and metallurgical analysis of torpedo fragments recovered by the Russian submarine. Defense Secretary Patricia Hawthorne, a former Air Force general known for her no-nonsense approach to military justice, studied the evidence with growing alarm. The documents suggested that the attack on the Deep Explorer had been ordered to prevent the research team from discovering evidence of illegal toxic waste dumping by a defense contractor with close ties to several high-ranking Pentagon officials. Admiral Blackwood, Secretary Hawthorne said, her voice cutting through the tension in the secure conference room, explained to me how a civilian research vessel conducting environmental studies posed a threat to national security. Blackwood maintained his composure, but those who knew him well could see the strain in his eyes. Madam Secretary, the Deep Explorer was operating in an area containing classified military installations. Their presence threatened to compromise ongoing strategic operations. What strategic operations? According to these documents, the area contained nothing but illegally dumped chemical weapons from decommissioned munitions. Chemical weapons that your department was responsible for disposing of properly. The room fell silent. Blackwood realized that Rodriguez had not just exposed the attack on the research vessel, but had also uncovered the underlying conspiracy that had motivated it. For years, a defense contractor called Atlantic Maritime Solutions had been paid millions of dollars to safely dispose of old chemical weapons. Instead, they had been dumping them in deep ocean trenches and pocketing the money saved by avoiding proper disposal procedures. When the Deep Explorer's research team began detecting unusual chemical signatures in the water, they had unknowingly stumbled upon evidence of massive environmental crimes committed with the knowledge and approval of several Pentagon officials. The decision to destroy the research vessel had been made in a panic with the hope that the crew's deaths could be blamed on equipment failure or severe weather. Meanwhile, in a secure conference room 3 floors below Rodriguez's holding cell, his assigned military defense attorney was reviewing the charges that would soon be filed against him. Captain Jennifer Walsh, a former prosecutor with the Judge Advocate General's Corps, had initially been skeptical of Rodriguez's claims. But as she studied the evidence her client had gathered, she realized she was defending someone who might be the most important whistleblower in military history. Walsh had 22 years of experience in military law, including several high-profile court-martial cases. She understood that Rodriguez faced charges that could result in life imprisonment or even the death penalty if the government decided to pursue treason charges aggressively. But she also understood that the evidence he had revealed could potentially save countless lives by exposing ongoing environmental crimes and preventing future cover-ups. The first break in Rodriguez's favor came from an unexpected source. Captain Yuri Volkov of the Russian submarine Kazan had convinced his government to release detailed sonar recordings of the area where the Deep Explorer had been destroyed. The recordings clearly showed 4 torpedo explosions in rapid succession, followed by the acoustic signature of a sinking ship and the death cries of marine life killed by chemical contamination. Even more damaging to the Navy's position was the revelation that the Russian submarine had been in the area specifically because their environmental monitoring satellites had detected chemical contamination plumes that suggested illegal dumping. Volkov had not been conducting espionage operations, but rather investigating environmental crimes that were affecting Russian territorial waters downstream from the dumping sites. Rodriguez's family learned about his actions through television news reports while he was still being processed into detention. Maria Rodriguez was grading papers in her classroom when a colleague burst in with news that her husband was being called both a hero and a traitor on national television. Their daughters, Isabella and Sophia, were pulled out of classes and taken home as media crews surrounded their suburban San Diego neighborhood. That evening, Maria sat with her daughters in their living room, watching news coverage of the scandal.
Isabella, 16 years old and her father's biggest supporter, was furious at the accusations of treason.
Sophia, 14 and more politically aware than her sister, understood the complexity of her father's situation.
Mom, did Dad really give secrets to the Russians? Sophia asked, her voice small and confused.
Maria chose her words carefully. Your father discovered evidence that innocent people had been murdered, and he made sure that evidence couldn't be hidden. Whether that makes him a hero or a traitor depends on what you think is more important: following orders or protecting innocent people. The media attention intensified when family members of the Deep Explorer victims began speaking publicly. Dr. Sarah Kim's husband, Professor David Kim from UCLA's Marine Biology Department, held a press conference where he praised Rodriguez for revealing the truth about his wife's death. Commander Rodriguez risked everything to ensure that my wife and her colleagues didn't die in vain. Their research was trying to protect the ocean environment, and they were murdered for it. But not all the families supported Rodriguez's actions. Michael Torres's parents, both retired Air Force officers, felt that Rodriguez should have worked through official channels rather than sharing information with foreign powers. Our son died serving his country's environmental protection efforts, his father stated. We don't believe betraying military secrets honors his memory.
The divide in public opinion reflected deeper questions about loyalty, honor, and the limits of military obedience. Veterans groups split into opposing factions, with some supporting Rodriguez as a modern-day whistleblower and others condemning him as a traitor who had violated the fundamental trust of military service.
Admiral Blackwood's position became increasingly untenable as investigators discovered evidence of the broader conspiracy. Atlantic Maritime Solutions had been operating with impunity for years, dumping toxic waste in international waters while collecting government contracts worth over $2 billion. The company's executives had cultivated relationships with Pentagon officials through golf outings, hunting trips, and lucrative post-retirement consulting positions. When investigators raided Atlantic Maritime Solutions headquarters, they discovered internal communications that proved company executives knew their dumping activities were creating environmental disasters in marine ecosystems.
Even worse, they found evidence that several Pentagon officials had received substantial financial kickbacks for ensuring that the company's contracts were renewed without proper oversight. Rodriguez's cellmate was a young Marine corporal named David Cruz who had been arrested for drug possession.
Cruz had initially been hostile to Rodriguez, believing the media reports that painted him as a traitor. But as they spent long hours talking in their shared cell, Cruz began to understand the moral complexity of Rodriguez's situation.
"Sir, can I ask you something?" Cruz said one evening as they waited for lights out. "Do you regret what you did?" Rodriguez considered the question carefully. "David, I regret that 17 innocent people had to die before I learned the truth. I regret that my family has to suffer because of my actions. I regret that good sailors like my crew have to face questioning and suspicion because they served under me." He paused, staring at the ceiling of their small cell. "But I don't regret exposing the truth. If I had stayed silent, those families would never have known what really happened to their loved ones, and the people responsible for murdering them would never have faced justice." As the investigation expanded, more evidence of corruption emerged. The Pentagon's Inspector General discovered that the illegal dumping operation had contaminated fishing grounds used by several Pacific Island nations, causing birth defects and cancer clusters in local populations. Environmental scientists estimated that the contamination would persist for decades, affecting marine ecosystems across thousands of square miles of ocean. Rodriguez's case became a symbol for broader questions about military accountability and environmental justice. Environmental groups rallied to his support, while military traditionalists argued that his actions had damaged national security and undermined military discipline. The complexity of the situation was evident in the conflicted reactions from Rodriguez's former naval colleagues. Some submarine commanders publicly supported his actions, arguing that military officers had a duty to refuse illegal orders. Others maintained that he should have found ways to expose the truth without violating security protocols or sharing information with foreign powers. As his court-martial approached, Rodriguez knew that he faced an uncertain future. The charges against him were serious enough to result in decades of imprisonment, but the evidence he had revealed was reshaping military policy and environmental law. Whatever happened to him personally, he had succeeded in ensuring that the truth about the deep explorer would not remain buried beneath the waves. 6 months after Rodriguez's arrest, the courtroom at Naval Base San Diego was packed with reporters, military officials, family members, and supporters from both sides of the controversy. The court-martial of Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez had become the most closely watched military trial in decades, with implications that extended far beyond one man's career. Judge Admiral Margaret Foster, a 30-year veteran of military justice known for her fairness and attention to detail, called the proceedings to order. Admiral Foster had presided over some of the Navy's most complex cases, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for the legal and moral complexity of Rodriguez's situation. The prosecution, led by Captain Robert Sterling, argued that Rodriguez had violated his oath of office and committed treason by sharing classified information with foreign powers. Sterling, a decorated former submarine commander himself, understood the importance of military discipline and chain of command. Members of the jury, Sterling began his opening statement. The defendant stands accused of betraying his country, his service, and his fellow sailors. Regardless of his motivations, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez violated the most fundamental principles of military service when he chose to disobey direct orders and share classified information with Russian military personnel. Captain Jennifer Walsh, Rodriguez's defense attorney, countered with an argument that challenged the very foundations of military obedience. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client discovered evidence of mass murder and chose to prevent a cover-up that would have denied justice to 17 innocent victims and their families. The real question before this court is whether following orders is more important than preventing crimes against humanity. The trial's first week was dominated by technical testimony about submarine operations, communication protocols, and the classification levels of the information Rodriguez had transmitted. Expert witnesses explained the sophisticated sonar analysis that had revealed the acoustic signatures of torpedo explosions, while intelligence officers testified about the potential damage to national security caused by Rodriguez's communications with Captain Volkov. But the trial's emotional impact became clear when family members of the Deep Explorer victims began testifying. Sarah Kim's husband David took the witness stand wearing a photograph of his late wife pinned to his lapel. "My wife dedicated her life to protecting marine ecosystems," David Kim testified, his voice steady but filled with grief. "She was murdered because she discovered evidence of environmental crimes, and then those crimes were covered up." Commander Rodriguez gave us the truth about what happened to Sarah and her colleagues.
That truth is worth more than any military protocol. The prosecution's case was severely undermined when Admiral Blackwood was called to testify under oath about his knowledge of the illegal dumping operations.
Under intense cross-examination by Captain Walsh, Blackwood was forced to admit that he had known about Atlantic Maritime Solutions' illegal activities for over 2 years, but had taken no action to stop them. "Admiral Blackwood," Walsh asked, "did you have knowledge that Atlantic Maritime Solutions was dumping chemical weapons in violation of international environmental law?" Blackwood's answer was barely audible. "I was aware of irregularities in their disposal procedures." "And did you take any action to investigate these irregularities or report them to appropriate authorities?" "The matter was considered classified and under review." Walsh pressed harder.
"Admiral, did you personally receive any financial benefits from Atlantic Maritime Solutions?" The question hung in the courtroom, air like an accusation. Blackwood's hesitation before answering told everyone present that he was calculating whether to commit perjury or destroy his career.
"I received consulting fees for environmental impact assessments," he finally admitted. The revelation that Admiral Blackwood had been personally profiting from the company responsible for the environmental disaster sent shockwaves through the military justice system.
Within hours of his testimony, the Pentagon announced that Blackwood was being relieved of command and faced his own criminal investigation. Commander Chen testified as a character witness for Rodriguez, describing his consistent adherence to ethical principles throughout their years of service together.
"In 4 years of serving under Commander Rodriguez," Chen stated, "I never once saw him prioritize his personal interests over the welfare of his crew or the principles of military service. When he discovered evidence of mass murder, he chose justice over career advancement."
The trial's most dramatic moment came when Captain Yuri Volkov appeared via secure video link to testify about his interactions with Rodriguez. Speaking through an interpreter, the Russian submarine commander provided detailed testimony about the evidence his crew had recovered from the Deep Explorer wreckage.
"Commander Rodriguez could have followed orders and allowed this crime to remain hidden," Volkov testified. "Instead, he chose to cooperate with our investigation because he believed that truth and justice were more important than national pride. In my country, we understand that such courage is rare and should be honored." The prosecution struggled to maintain their narrative that Rodriguez was a traitor when the supposed enemy he had aided was actually investigating crimes committed by American officials. Volkov's testimony revealed that the Russian government had been preparing to expose the dumping operation through diplomatic channels regardless of Rodriguez's actions.
As the trial progressed, public opinion continued to shift in Rodriguez's favor. Environmental groups organized rallies supporting his actions, while veterans organizations remained divided.
The case had become a symbol of broader questions about government accountability and the limits of loyalty. Rodriguez's own testimony lasted 3 days and was broadcast live on major news networks.
Speaking clearly and without apparent emotion, he described the moral reasoning that had led to his decision to disobey orders. "I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States," Rodriguez testified.
"That oath requires me to uphold justice and protect innocent life. When I discovered evidence that American military personnel had committed mass murder and were covering it up, I faced a choice between military obedience and moral duty. I chose moral duty." Captain Sterling's cross-examination was aggressive but ultimately ineffective.
Rodriguez remained calm and consistent in his answers, never showing regret for his actions while acknowledging their consequences. "Commander Rodriguez," Sterling asked, "do you understand that your actions have damaged trust between allied nations and potentially compromised ongoing military operations?" Rodriguez looked directly at the prosecutor.
"Captain Sterling, I understand that exposing the truth sometimes has complicated consequences.
But I also understand that covering up mass murder would have had far worse consequences for our nation's honor and integrity.
The trial's outcome was decided by testimony from an unexpected witness. Chief Petty Officer Thompson, Rodriguez's sonar operator, had been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. Thompson revealed that he had been monitoring communications between Admiral Blackwood and Atlantic Maritime Solutions for months before the Deep Explorer incident. I knew something was wrong with the dumping operations, Thompson testified. My sonar readings showed chemical contamination that was killing marine life across hundreds of square miles. When I reported this to Admiral Blackwood, I was ordered to classify the information and forget what I had seen.
Thompson's testimony proved that the Navy's leadership had known about the environmental disaster for months, but had chosen to protect their financial relationships with Atlantic Maritime Solutions rather than address the problem. The jury deliberated for 18 hours before reaching their verdict. Admiral Foster called the court to order as Rodriguez stood to hear his fate. On the charge of disobeying a lawful order, the jury foreman announced, "We find the defendant guilty." Rodriguez felt his heart sink as he realized he would face some form of punishment for his actions. On the charge of treason, the jury foreman continued, "We find the defendant not guilty." On the charge of communicating classified information to foreign powers, the jury foreman concluded, "We find the defendant not guilty by reason of justification." The courtroom erupted in cheers and protests as Rodriguez felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. He had been convicted of disobeying orders but acquitted of the most serious charges that could have resulted in life imprisonment.
Admiral Foster imposed a sentence that reflected the complexity of the case. Rodriguez was sentenced to reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, and dismissal from the Navy, but he would serve no prison time.
The sentence effectively ended his military career, but acknowledged that his actions had been motivated by legitimate moral concerns. In her sentencing statement, Admiral Foster addressed the broader implications of the case. This court recognizes that Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez faced an extraordinary moral dilemma. While we cannot condone disobedience of orders, we also cannot ignore the fact that his actions exposed serious crimes and prevented a miscarriage of justice.
2 years after the trial, Rodriguez worked as a marine safety consultant in Seattle, using his submarine expertise to help environmental organizations monitor ocean pollution. His marriage to Maria had survived the ordeal, though their daughters still faced occasional harassment from classmates whose parents viewed Rodriguez as a traitor. The environmental cleanup of the illegally dumped chemical weapons cost the government over $8 billion and took 7 years to complete. Atlantic Maritime Solutions was dissolved, and its executives received prison sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. Several Pentagon officials, including Admiral Blackwood, were convicted of corruption and conspiracy charges. The families of the Deep Explorer victims received substantial financial settlements from the government, though no amount of money could compensate them for their losses. Dr. Sarah Kim's research on ocean pollution was posthumously published and became a foundational text for marine environmental protection. Rodriguez occasionally spoke at veterans' gatherings and environmental conferences, discussing the moral complexities of military service and the importance of individual conscience in institutional settings. He never expressed regret for his actions, though he acknowledged the pain his choices had caused his family and former colleagues. On quiet evenings, Rodriguez would stand on his deck overlooking Puget Sound, watching the ferries navigate the dark waters. He knew that somewhere beneath those waves, chemical weapons and toxic waste still threatened marine ecosystems. But he also knew that his actions had prevented far worse environmental disasters and had established legal precedents that would protect future whistleblowers. Commander Chen had left the Navy after Rodriguez's trial and become a civilian contractor specializing in submarine safety systems. She maintained contact with Rodriguez and often reminded him that their actions had saved countless lives by exposing the dumping operations. "Marcus," she told him during one of their annual reunions, "history will remember you as someone who chose conscience over convenience." That's not a bad legacy for a career naval officer. Rodriguez would smile and change the subject, never comfortable with being called a hero. In his mind, he had simply done what any moral person would do when faced with evidence of mass murder and environmental destruction. The fact that such actions were considered controversial said more about institutional failures than about individual courage. The Rodriguez case became a landmark in military law, establishing important precedents for conscientious disobedience and whistleblower protection. Military academies added ethics courses that used his case as a teaching tool, exploring the tension between loyalty and moral duty that defines military service. Years later, when Rodriguez was asked what he would tell young naval officers facing similar moral dilemmas, his answer was always the same: remember that your oath is to the Constitution and the principles it represents, not to any individual commander
or institution. When those principles conflict with orders, trust your conscience. The consequences of moral cowardice are always worse than the consequences of moral courage. The USS Phantom continued to serve in the Pacific Fleet under a new commander, but Rodriguez's actions had left a permanent mark on her crew and mission. The submarine's motto was changed to "Truth Beneath the Waves," and a small plaque in the wardroom honored the 17 civilians who died aboard the Deep Explorer. Rodriguez never went to sea again, but his legacy lived on in the countless lives saved by his courage to speak truth to power. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of justice. Banished from the carrier, the submarine surfaced against command.